On a quiet Saturday evening in West Hollywood, an awful incident occurred inside an apartment just a few blocks from the busy city streets. Despite the calmness, no unusual sounds, no loud arguments or cries for help, but behind that door, a disagreement escalated into a serious situation. When police and firefighters finally entered the apartment, they were stunned by what they found, even experienced officers. What really happened that night? Kirtland Ma was born on December 24, 1979, in Scottsdale, Arizona, in the eastern part of Maricopa County. He was the youngest of two sons of Danny and Peggy Ma, a Chinese-American couple. Kirtland grew up in a loving and peaceful environment. He was a deeply cherished child, especially by his maternal grandparents, Wing Doi Jimmy and Ellen Lee. With his friendly demeanor and constant smile, he had a natural charm that endeared him to everyone, making his grandparents feel incredibly fortunate to have him as their grandson. Kirtland showed early academic potential in elementary school, but it was in high school that his passion for learning really blossomed. He was not only a talented student but also had a strong curiosity that drove him to seek knowledge beyond what was taught in classes. After regular school hours, he took advanced mathematics courses at another institution, aiming to push himself further. One day, while heading to one of these extra classes, he met a girl his age from a different school. Their brief conversation left a lasting impression. She was drawn to Kirtland's kindness and sense of humor, and he felt the same way. From that point on, they became very close. During their junior year, they both transferred to the same school in Phoenix. Soon after, she worked up the courage to confess her feelings for Kirtland, believing he was her soulmate. She shared her deep love for him, but Kirtland, although considerate, did not feel the same way. He viewed her more like a sister. This left she heartbroken, but eventually, she recognized the value of their friendship and chose to cherish it instead of dwelling on unrequited love. Meanwhile, Kirtland focused even more on his studies, which led him to excel academically and stand out among his peers. In 1997, Kirtland took a standardized school assessment test, an important exam in the U.S. used to evaluate students' reading, writing, and math skills, which is often crucial for university admissions. His score was nearly perfect, earning him the distinguished title of Presidential Scholar, an honor for the country's top students. Kirtland was dedicated to his studies, but he also believed in leading a balanced life, which led him to compete in tennis. He frequently participated in city tournaments, many hosted at local universities, highlighting his versatility and discipline. In 1998, Kirtland started a new chapter at Yale University, choosing to major in American Studies. As he adapted to campus life, he was assigned to a residential college and shared a room with a student named Michael. The two quickly became close friends. Michael was particularly impressed by Kirtland's constant kindness and selflessness. He was someone who offered help without expecting anything in return. Michael's impressions were spot on. Kirtland's calm demeanor, patience, and genuine kindness made him magnetic. He easily connected with others, not out of effort, but because it was part of his character. His fellow students at Yale quickly recognized his captivating personality, sharp intellect, and humble nature, leading them to respect and befriend him. As people got to know him better, many realized that he was a trusted confidant. Friends often turned to him for advice, and Kirtland never let them down. He showed his appreciation not through grand declarations but through thoughtful gestures. During trips to New York City, just a couple of hours away from campus, he would often return with small gifts for those he cared about. Although he and female friend no longer lived in the same city, their friendship never faded. In one of their many conversations, she asked him why he never spoke about dating women. Deep down, she believed his silence was a kind way of sparing her feelings, but she wasn't prepared for the answer Kirtland gave. In a moment of honesty, Kirtland shared a part of himself he had kept private. He simply wasn't attracted to women. He explained that he was gay. She, surprised but open-hearted, listened carefully. Although it saddened her to think that Kirtland hadn't felt safe sharing this sooner, that conversation, free of judgment and full of trust, marked a turning point. It allowed Kirtland to embrace his identity more freely. From that day forward, he confided in she about the men he was attracted to. After graduating in 2002, Kirtland pursued another dream, traveling the world. His first destination was China, where he taught English and later took part in a cultural exchange program. This experience led him to Spain, where he lived with a host family and immersed himself in a different culture. Those months abroad helped him gain clarity about his future. By 2004, Kirtland realized he wanted to become a doctor. Driven by a strong sense of purpose, he returned to Yale, this time attending its School of Medicine. He continued to excel academically, writing his medical thesis on how traditional Chinese medicine could be applied to treat HIV patients in Hong Kong. After earning his degree in 2008, Kirtland moved to Manhattan to start his emergency medicine residency. During this time, he volunteered with a team of about 40 local healthcare professionals dedicated to educating New York's LGBTQ community about the risks associated with illicit substance use and unsafe intimate relationships. Kirtland's dedication as a doctor shone through when he made an exceptional and precise diagnosis for a patient with a rare type of fish poisoning. This case was significant enough to be featured in an article in the New York Times. Outside of his medical career, Kirtland enjoyed a lively social life, attending various gatherings and events when his schedule permitted. It was during one of these social outings that he met Andre Davids. Born in 1977 and a native of New York, Andre was very close to his sister. Unlike Kirtland, who was outgoing, Andre was more introverted. At that time, Andre was undergoing medical treatment, but the details of his condition were kept private. What was known was that his treatment involved medication that could potentially interact dangerously with other substances. Despite their differing personalities, Kirtland and Andre quickly felt a strong attraction to each other. What began as a friendship soon blossomed into a romantic relationship. Even though Kirtland was open about many aspects of his life, he chose to keep his relationship with Andre private for a long time, even from his closest friends and family. By the time he completed his medical residency, he felt it was time to take a break from the pace of New York City. Longing to reconnect with his family, Kirtland returned to Arizona in July 2012. He temporarily moved in with his parents, Peggy and Danny. Grateful to be home again and the support of his loved ones, Kirtland shared his happiness on social media. Soon after, he began working at 2 hospitals in the Phoenix metropolitan area. Though miles apart, his bond with Andre remained strong. He also kept in touch with his friends in New York, often reuniting with them during visits, whether they came to Arizona or he traveled east. Eventually, Andre began accompanying him on these trips until, in 2013, he decided to move to Arizona permanently to be closer to Kirtland. That September, Kirtland posted a photo of the two of them together online, making their relationship public for the first time. The revelation surprised some friends, but they warmly welcomed Andre into their circle. They didn't just offer polite gestures, they genuinely tried to include him socially. However, from the outset, Andre seemed reluctant to connect. His jealousy toward Kirtland's friendships gradually became more noticeable over time. This possessiveness intensified, and he began asking Kirtland to avoid spending time with his friends. Kirtland, ever the optimist, remained calm. He didn't allow Andre's behavior to derail his own goals. He continued making plans with his friend, even organizing trips together. Rather than feel discouraged, Kirtland believed that a new environment might help their relationship. He dreamed of moving to a more open and accepting place for LGBT people, somewhere they could thrive as a couple. After giving it thoughtful consideration, California seemed like the perfect destination. He was excited by the idea and shared his vision with Andre, assuring him that they would embark on this new chapter together. Once they relocated, Kirtland began working at a hospital. Simultaneously, he looked forward to being more active in the LGBT community. California, with its vibrant culture and inclusivity, felt like the ideal place to do just that. True to his enthusiastic nature, the prospect energized him deeply. In February 2014, they rented an apartment in West Hollywood, a lively neighborhood known for its nightlife and diversity. Initially, only Andre moved in, as Kirtland had to make a trip to Japan. But upon returning to the US on March 24, Kirtland sensed immediately that the change in scenery had done little to repair what was broken. The tensions between them still lingered. For the first time, he seriously contemplated ending the relationship. On the afternoon of Saturday, March 29, 2014, after a restless night for Andre, who had used banned substances and barely slept, Kirtland decided it was finally time to have the difficult conversation they had avoided for too long. Calmly, he expressed his dissatisfaction with where things were heading and admitted that he was considering dating other people. Andre, unprepared, unwilling to accept the possibility of separation, refused outright. He also rejected any suggestion of an open relationship, insisting on exclusivity. The conversation quickly escalated into an argument as tensions flared until both men reached for kitchen knives. What began as a verbal exchange devolved into a physical struggle. Kirtland, in a moment of regained clarity, attempted to de-escalate the situation, but Andre, overtaken by rage, did not stop. In a violent outburst, he seized the weapon and stabbed Kirtland repeatedly until he collapsed, lifeless. Panicked and unsure of what to do next, Andre called his sister and told her they had a serious fight, but he withheld the horrifying truth of what had just happened. Alarmed by her brother's unstable behavior and fearing he might harm himself, Andre's sister immediately contacted the police, sharing all the information she had. Officers were dispatched to the address she provided to conduct a check. However, when no one responded at the door, they eventually left the scene. As the hours passed and she remained without news, Andre's sister called the police again. This time, officers returned to the apartment, accompanied by a team of firefighters. At 4:55 p.m. on Saturday, March 29, 2014, both teams entered an apartment in West Hollywood. Inside, they found a gruesome scene. Kirtland was on the kitchen floor after a violent attack. In the bathroom, Andre was in the tub, injured and holding a knife, threatening to take his own life. Next to him were a cell phone and a bottle of pills. A police officer quickly secured the knife, while the fire department helped lift Andre out of the tub. He was taken to a nearby hospital to treat injuries on his neck and wrists. Unfortunately, paramedics confirmed that they could do nothing for Kirtland, who was officially pronounced dead by the Los Angeles County coroner just before 7 p.m. The autopsy showed the extent of Kirtland's injuries. He had suffered 40 stab wounds from various sharp kitchen tools, was disemboweled, some organs were stuffed into the mouth, and pills were stuffed into the body cavity. From the outset, Andre Davids was identified as the main suspect. At the hospital, toxicology tests revealed multiple substances in his system. When detectives spoke with Andre in his hospital room, he did not refuse to answer their questions. Instead, he confessed to the murder and recounted the events leading up to it, expressing deep remorse and a wish to end his life. On Sunday, March 30, 2014, after further investigation, Andre was arrested at the West Hollywood Sheriff's Station. He was charged with murder involving a deadly weapon and held on a $1 million bail. He was then moved to the correctional facility in Los Angeles. News of Kirtland's murder spread quickly, dominating headlines and attracting significant media attention. Just a week later, a separate violent incident in the same apartment complex injured several people, causing widespread fear among residents. Many began to reassess their safety in the area. Andre's trial started in December 2015. He faced charges of voluntary manslaughter and second-degree murder. The distinction between these charges was crucial because California law required the prosecution to prove whether the crime involved express or implied malice, which impacted the potential sentence severity. Kirtland's family advocated for the most serious charge, which could lead to life imprisonment. In contrast, the defense argued that Andre's mental state was impaired by banned substance use and prescription medications. They pointed out that Andre had no prior history of violence and claimed that the killing occurred in a moment of intense emotional distress, a common argument for reducing charges in emotionally driven crimes. The jury considered various factors, including Kirtland's stated desire to end the relationship, which may have intensified Andre's emotional turmoil. On December 17, 2015, Andre Davids was convicted of voluntary manslaughter. His sentencing hearing took place on January 21, 2016, at the Los Angeles Superior Court. A particularly emotional moment occurred when Wayland, Massachusetts, the older brother of the victim Kirtland, addressed the court. He spoke directly to Andre, conveying his deep pain and anger over the loss of his brother in such a violent manner. He expressed a wish that the memory of the crime would torment Andre for the rest of his life. In California, involuntary manslaughter carries a sentence of 3 to 11 years. The judge decided to impose the maximum sentence of 11 years, along with an additional year for the use of a deadly weapon. Kirtland's family and many others in the community were deeply troubled by the verdict, believing the sentence to be too lenient given the brutality of the crime. Some even called for a retrial to seek a harsher punishment, but the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution prohibits a second trial for the same crime. Andre's legal team appealed the 12-year sentence, seeking a reduction. The appeal was heard on November 17, 2016, by a panel of 3 judges in California's 2nd District Court of Appeal. The defense argued for a mid-range sentence of 6 years. However, the deputy district attorney described the crime scene as one of the most horrific she had ever seen, which left the judges convinced of the crime's severity. In her closing statement, the deputy district attorney highlighted Andre's danger to society. Ultimately, the judges upheld the original sentence, agreeing that the nature of the crime warranted the maximum punishment allowed by law. The tragic death of Kirtland marked a profound loss for his family, friends, and the communities he touched. A gifted doctor and compassionate soul, Kirtland's journey from a cherished child in Scottsdale to a respected physician in West Hollywood was defined by kindness, intellect, and a commitment to helping others. His life, cut short by a violent act born of personal turmoil, left an indelible void. Andre David's conviction for voluntary manslaughter and 12-year sentence offered some measure of justice, but for many, it could not erase the pain of such a brutal crime. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Carolyn Watson. If kidnapping is not about satisfying the criminal's painful desires, then most often, the attackers seek money. But it is not always that simple. Some frightening actions have a much more mundane nature. Budgeree, in Australia, does not seem like a place where something terrifying could happen. It is a rural and remote area with a population of fewer than 200 people. Located in the peaceful region of Victoria, it is not even marked on all maps. The local community consists of only a few dozen families, and everyone knows each other well. However, this calm and measured pace did not prevent criminal stories from surfacing. The media began to write about the quiet and prosperous life in Budgeree, which changed in 2008 due to an event that made the entire continent shudder. A man named Julian Buchwald, 25, lived there. His family owns a large piece of land in the area. Julian had a girlfriend, 17-year-old Carolyn Watson, who lived in a neighboring town. They had been dating for about 2 years. Even in his younger years, Julian loved to explore the surroundings, especially his plot of land, to satisfy his natural curiosity. The difficult terrain, combined with the abundance of vegetation, offered plenty of opportunities for imagination and exploration. Both Julian and Carolyn continued to live with their parents. Despite dating for 2 years, they were very serious about their relationship. They often discussed the prospects of marriage. Being deeply religious individuals, just like their families, they even visited the local pastor of the church to declare their desire to marry during a Sunday service, where they had first met. Faith played a significant role in their lives. On the morning of March 4, 2008, Julian picked up Carolyn from her home for a picnic. She lived in the neighboring town of Churchill, which was a bit larger, with about 5,000 people. It was located about 20 minutes away by car from Budgeree. After leaving, they returned to Julian's house because he had forgotten some food in the car that could spoil in the heat. They gathered everything they needed and quickly left before it got too hot. Typically, Julian and Carolyn would relax on Julian's family property, where there were plenty of secluded spots that looked picturesque for a romantic outing. However, this time, they decided to venture further to visit a nearby waterfall. Around 3 p.m., they planned to return. Most of the journey went smoothly, but just before reaching the waterfall, Julian suddenly became alarmed. He noticed the carcass of an animal on the side of the road, so he slowed down and stopped at a safe distance around a small bend. He told Carolyn that he wanted to get out to check, as he thought the animal might still be alive and he could help it. This curiosity wasn't unusual for him. Carolyn had gotten used to these quirks and decided to wait for him inside the SUV while following his movements in the rearview mirror. At some point, Carolyn became distracted. When she looked back again, she no longer saw Julian. She assumed he had gone behind the hill or a turn, which is why she was out of view. But after some time, Julian still hadn't returned, and this began to worry her. He always came back quickly. Realizing they were far from the city and in the wilderness, Carolyn was afraid to get out of the car. Her boyfriend's absence increasingly troubled her. Suddenly, she caught sight of something even more frightening in the mirror. A figure darted into view. She saw a man standing next to the car. He looked threatening, fully dressed with gloves, and wearing a balaclava. Carolyn intended to lock the doors of the car, but the stranger had already jumped to her side, opened the door. Before she could react, pulled her out of the car and threw her to the ground. He covered her mouth with tape, silencing her screams, and she could barely resist. Within minutes, the kidnapper had bound and blindfolded her, then shoved her into the trunk of his car. Terrified, Carolyn hoped that Julian would return to save her. However, the kidnapper got behind the wheel and drove away, leaving her alone with her fear. She tried to escape, but the ropes were too tight to loosen. It felt like the trip lasted several hours. Eventually, the SUV came to a stop, the trunk opened. The kidnapper, still wearing a balaclava and gloves, stood in front of her again. He threw her onto the ground, and Carolyn realized she was still unable to free herself from her bindings. Despite her desperate attempts to do so, she had little idea of where she was located, but she saw that there was a dense forest surrounding her. The stranger tore off her clothes, using a knife to cut away her underwear, and then walked away. Carolyn was completely naked, lying next to the car. She heard a sound as if the kidnapper was digging. This noise came from a few meters away. Carolyn realized that she was about to die. She could not imagine what awaited her, but she understood that she would not get out of here alive. The only thing she could do in such a situation was to pray. At that time, Julian's mother and father noticed their absence and that both had left by car. Julian and Carolyn told their parents that they were going on a picnic together but did not specify the location. They were expected to return around 3 p.m., but the clock now read around 5 p.m. While everything could be attributed to youth and passion, Julian and Carolyn was always very responsible, was never late, especially for an extended period. Julian's mother called her son, but he didn't answer. Carolyn also ignored the calls. This was uncharacteristic for them, as they always stayed in touch. A delay of several hours seemed unthinkable, considering that they had not warned anyone that they would be late. The parents inspected the area around the house but found no traces of Julian and Carolyn. A search operation alone on such a large piece of land seemed pointless, so Julian's mother decided to return to the house and wait for them in the driveway. Suddenly, she discovered something strange. She saw a glint as from glass and found a bottle with a note inside that was stuck in the fence mesh. She read it, and its contents horrified her. Some criminal had written that he had kidnapped Julian and Carolyn. The text was full of obscene language. The criminal warned the parents not to report it to the police, otherwise, Carolyn would be burned alive, and Julian would die in agony. The kidnapper spoke of some business he had to attend to, stating that if he succeeded, the children would return home safe and sound, but only if the parents complied with all his demands. This message horrified she. Though she panicked, she was not going to follow the demands of the criminal and reported the matter to the police. Law enforcement officers immediately responded to the call and began to inspect the area, which was rugged terrain with a lot of vegetation. There was much work to be done. Relatives hoped that Julian and Carolyn had secluded themselves in the area since they rarely left Butchery. The family's situation worsened when Julian's relatives found out that both Julian's and Carolyn's families had received ominous notes. The families of Julian and Carolyn and the detectives met to discuss what had happened. Carolyn's father found a similar bottle on the porch of their house, which contained a message insisting that they not contact the police, also threatening to kill Julian and Carolyn. Even worse, he promised to deal with the entire family if his demands were violated. Everyone wondered what could possibly have motivated the hatred toward this sweet couple of young people. Initially, it was believed that that were just a cruel joke. Now the police had two notes, as well as the real disappearance of Julian and Carolyn. Until late in the evening, neither Julian nor Carolyn had made contact. The handwriting in both letters was identical. That means that the two families may have a common enemy. However, no one had the slightest idea who he might be. It was curious that the note contained a symbol that seemed to have an occult nature. Some group that considered Christians their enemies. This was considered a valuable clue, and it was quickly discovered that it was used by a certain satanic cult called the Order of Nine Angles. The history of this organization was checked and found that it had appeared in Great Britain back in the 60s, was actively luring in members in the 70s. However, the cult did not become widespread and did not have a large number of followers. Some of its members were being held accountable for extremist ideology and various threats. As the activists gained notoriety, the group opened branches in several countries around the world. Their ideology included isolating their members from the rest of society. They openly advocated for violence and committing crimes against perceived enemies, specifically targeting Christians whom they recognized as opponents to be destroyed. The most frightening aspect of this movement's activities was the propaganda promoting human sacrifices, which horrified families and prompted the police to intensify their efforts. Julian and Carolyn were simply devout Christians. Interestingly, until that point, the activities of this group had only been observed in Australia. They could potentially attempt to declare themselves by committing their first ritual murder. Satanists might use the sacrifice of Julian and Carolyn to gain fame from there began to gather like-minded people. The relatives did not receive any news for several days. Julian's car was declared wanted, but that didn't help. All the detectives' efforts proved in vain as they couldn't find either Julian and Carolyn or any leads on where to continue searching. Considering who Carolyn and Julian may have contacted, it was believed that it would be impossible to return they alive. The relatives knew that they had packed only a small amount of food meant to last a few hours. They had no worn clothes and no equipment. They did not have tents to survive the temperature fluctuations that occur in Australia during the day and night. There were also concerns about dangerous areas where Julian and Carolyn could fall victim to predators. The scorching heat and hunger posed significant threats. Even if they escaped from their kidnappers, encounters with wild or poisonous animals could be deadly. The rescue operation transitioned to a recovery effort, but this, too, yielded no results. 6 days passed during which the families of Julian and Carolyn did not find any peace. Suddenly, a message arrived: Julian and Carolyn had been found. What was most astonishing was that both were relatively safe. They had simply emerged onto the roadway near the Alpine National Park. A passing farmer stopped to help and immediately reported their situation to the police. It was not surprising that law enforcement officers were unable to find any trace of the individuals Julian and Carolyn. The national park was several hundred kilometers from where they lived, requiring about a 6-hour drive by car. Julian sustained serious injuries. While making their way through the desert, he suffered sunburn, cuts from thorny bushes, blisters, and bruises all over his body. Nonetheless, aside from the extreme stress of their ordeal, they were otherwise fine. Detectives met with Julian and Carolyn to gather information and prevent potentially dangerous criminals from operating in the area. They first communicated with Carolyn, who detailed the horrific trials she endured after being kidnapped. She described being undressed, thrown to the ground, where she lay and prayed just a few meters away from her kidnapper, who was digging in the earth. She was certain that this was her grave. This agonizing wait continued interminably until the sounds of digging stopped. Carolyn heard footsteps moving away, and everything went silent. Realizing that the criminal had abandoned her, she knew she could not remain passive. Quickly, she attempted to free herself from her ropes, but they did not yield. Her hands hurt as she rubbed them until they bled. Suddenly, she heard Julian's voice calling her name as he crawled closer. He managed to rip off her blindfold and the duct tape from her mouth. Julian, also tied up and without clothes, had managed to free his hands. This allowed Julian to finally escape and then free Carolyn. However, the danger was not over. The kidnapper could return at any moment. There was no car, but the abandoned backpack and scattered contents of the trunk remained. They found supplies that they had taken with them for a picnic, gathered everything, and fled into the thicket. They wanted to get as far away from that place as possible to plan their next steps. Along the way, Julian recounted his story. He approached an animal lying on the side of the road to examine the body, but as he leaned over, he heard footsteps approaching quickly from behind. He didn't have time to react before he was attacked. He was struck on the back of the head hard enough to lose consciousness. According to Julian, when he awoke a few hours later, he immediately began calling out for Carolyn. The criminal was no longer nearby, having escaped in an SUV. Over the next few days, they desperately tried to reach the road, making their way through thick bushes. They risked encountering wild animals. Even the slightest bite from an Australian poisonous spider or snake could be fatal. Their supplies were very limited since they had packed only a small amount of food for their picnic, specifically. During the day, Julian and Carolyn suffered from the suffocating heat, risking sunstroke. At night, they struggled to stay warm, sharing a single sleeping bag. The situation was compounded by the fear that the kidnapper could pursue them and find them at any moment. Both Julian and Carolyn were completely unaware of why this had happened to them. The situation worsened when, a few days later, they unwittingly returned to the same place where they had been held hostage. As it turned out, they had made a large circle. Nevertheless, Julian took advantage of the situation. Despite his fear of being caught, he was able to steal clothes and any remaining food, improving the dire condition of the starving couple. However, everything came to an end quickly. Carolyn fell into despair, feeling that they could not be saved, and found solace only in prayer. Finally, God heard her pleas. After 6 days, they were able to find their way out of the dense bushes. They emerged onto the road, where the police spoke to Julian, for the most part, confirmed his girlfriend's account, except for the part where he claimed to be unconscious. Julian and Carolyn was sent to stay in the hospital and then with their relatives, but law enforcement officers had no time to rest. Despite the miraculous rescue of the kidnapping victims, the armed forces still faced a real threat that the dangerous organization responsible for the kidnapping would continue its destructive activities. It had to be stopped at any cost. Before bloodshed could begin, the police decided to go to the place from which the prisoners had escaped. They found cut pieces of duct tape, clothing, a shovel, and other items, all of which were checked. To the detectives' amazement, some items belonged to Julian, including a rope found in his house's barn. There was also disturbed earth that had been dug up. The detectives discovered a balaclava, black clothing, gloves, and other things described by Carolyn. From that moment, Julian's story became even more disturbing. In particular, Julian was never able to show any signs of the head injuries he claimed to have sustained. Any such injuries should have remained visible, especially if Julian had indeed delivered a blow that could have knocked him out for several hours. They decided to talk to Julian again. From the start, the detectives made it clear that they had good reason to suspect him of kidnapping. Julian was nervous but insisted on his story, referring to his beloved, who confirmed much of what he said. However, within a few hours, he was brought to justice. Julian admitted that he had organized the kidnapping himself. He had bought the items he intended to use for the kidnapping in advance, taking some from home, including items that allowed him to hide his face from Carolyn. He had even trained for some time to tie knots that would not injure when immobilizing someone. The cult symbols used in the letters were meant to scare his parents and Carolyn's relatives into not contacting the police, preventing detective intervention. Julian deliberately used foul language in the letters he sent to the Buchwald and Watson families. No one thought he would say such words. Julian had deliberately chosen the longest route to the waterfall to avoid detection and confuse the tracks. The guy kept a lookout for anything suspicious that could attract attention and give him the opportunity to implement his plan. He eventually noticed an animal carcass on the side of the road and decided it was time to act. Julian stopped around a corner to hide from Carolyn's sight, changed his clothes, and returned to the car to play out the rest. The place he had chosen to take Carolyn was far away, allowing them to stay away from people. According to him, when Carolyn heard sounds of earth being dug up, he was actually not making a grave but getting rid of evidence. After that, he got into the car and drove away to hide it in the woods, then he returned to Carolyn. Along the way, he got rid of his clothes and wrapped ropes around his hands to make himself look like a kidnapped person. After that, he began to call her name in a weak voice, pretending that he had just regained consciousness after a blow to the head. The kidnapping was carefully planned. He had items that helped they survive this difficult period. Even the fact that they returned to the place from which they had escaped was part of the plan. However, one aspect still remained unclear. Why stage such a spectacle? 22-year-old Julian admitted that he wanted to marry Carolyn immediately. They had already been dating for 2 years, but she did not agree. 17-year-old Carolyn planned to finish school, decide on her future, go to college, get a job, become independent before finally tying the knot and starting a family. At the same time, both were devout Christians who believed in abstaining from intimate before marriage. He did not want to wait so long. He desperately wanted to satisfy his intimate desires, so he staged the kidnapping. He specifically planned everything so that they would both be isolated during their wandering through the dense thickets. Julian tried various tactics to persuade his girlfriend to be intimate. He reasoned that they might not survive this adventure, and it was worth trying intimate. He also convinced Carolyn that in the face of death, they had entered into an alliance in the fight for their lives, which he equated with marriage. Julian even tried to persuade her that they needed to engage in intimate intercourse to keep warm at night, claiming he had read about such a method somewhere. Carolyn was unwavering, continued to refuse, and insisted on her beliefs, convinced that God would save them. Therefore, his plan ultimately failed. Among the items Julian had prepared for the trip, there was a map of the national park. They had not actually gotten lost when Julian realized Carolyn was not going to give up. Therefore, he decided to lead them out of this national park. After Julian's confession, he was slapped by Carolyn, charged with kidnapping and perjury. The trial was scheduled for August 2009. Julian was not held in jail after the trial because his wealthy family posted bail. Julian took advantage of the situation and made another attempt to escape punishment. In September 2009, he obtained an Indian passport, boarded a plane, and flew to China. The document was obviously fake but of sufficient quality to fool Australian security services. Julian dyed his hair black and spent a long time sunbathing to darken his skin as much as possible, even though he was fair-skinned and required many tanning sessions. Although he managed to fly out of Australia, the Indian security services were more vigilant and refused to let him enter the country. Julian was arrested in Singapore. It was assumed that India was only the first stop on his journey and that Germany was intended to be his final destination. After that, he received a sentence of 7 years and 3 months for kidnapping, as well as an additional 6 months for escaping. He tried to challenge the court's decision, arguing that it was too harsh, but could not contest the fact that the kidnapping in this incident was a significant issue. In another unexpected turn of events, it was revealed that Julian was originally from Germany. His family had moved to Australia at an early age. In 2014, the Immigration Service considered the possibility of canceling his visa. Julian tried to resist this decision but failed. In 2016, he was deported to Germany, ending up in a country where he did not know the language at all. There were no relatives or acquaintances with whom he could start anew. His further fate is not reliably known, and there is no information about whether he went to prison. According to some sources, Julian's situation has worsened. On the other hand, Carolyn could not come to her senses for a long time after such a betrayal. It was difficult for her to learn to trust people, especially men. What happened in her life afterward is unknown.
On the morning of July 4th, 2011, the body of a woman was found 5 miles outside of Wayland, Massachusetts. A cyclist, who was enjoying the scenery near a swampy area, noticed something unusual and decided to investigate. To her shock, she discovered the lifeless body of a young girl lying in the grass and mud. It was clear that the girl had not drowned. Instead, she had suffered a brutal fate. There was a noticeable wound on her neck, and a bungee cord was entangled in her hair. The bystander, however, still in shock, called emergency services to report what she witnessed. When law enforcement arrived, they pulled the body out of the water and examined it before sending it for forensic analysis. Since the girl had only been in the water for a short time, her appearance had not changed much. Officers identified her as 18-year-old Lauren Astley, who had been reported missing the night before. Lauren did not come home or attend a meeting with her friends. CCTV footage showed her entering the shopping center where she worked as a sales clerk at 10 Mountain Orem on July 3rd and leaving at 6:51 p.m. after her shift ended. At that time, she was on the phone with someone. Sadly, this was the last confirmed sighting of her, and she has not been heard from since. Malcolm Astley, Lauren's father, started to feel anxious because his daughter was always punctual and reliable. If she said she would be home at a specific time, she always did. She never changed her plans without a reason, and usually, she would inform him if she was going to be late. Understanding that something might have gone wrong, Malcolm quickly alerted the police about her disappearance. The police quickly began the search for Lauren. At the same time, her family and friends joined in to look for her. News of her disappearance spread rapidly through word of mouth among their acquaintances. Eventually, her car was discovered in a local beach parking lot. The windows were down, and her personal belongings, including a purse and a laptop, were left inside the car. However, Lauren was still missing, and it was uncertain where she might have gone after abandoning her vehicle in that condition. When Malcolm learned that his daughter's car had been found, he quickly drove to the location to search for her. He walked along the shoreline, using a flashlight to scan the water as if he might find her there. Soon after, Lauren's friends arrived, choosing to stay overnight at the site in hopes of being the first to see her. They spent the entire night searching the area, wondering where Lauren could have gone. It was hard for them to believe that the person they had been talking and laughing with just moments ago could simply vanish. Tragically, just 12 hours later, Lauren's body was discovered. The first person the officers contacted was her father. They shared the devastating news with him and asked him to come for identification. Malcolm struggled to accept that the girl on the pathologist's table was his daughter. However, once he composed himself, he officially recognized her. Before him lay his young and vibrant daughter, who had so much potential ahead of her. Heartbroken, he faced the painful reality and knew he had two important tasks: to inform his ex-wife about the tragedy and to find the person responsible for his daughter's death. When the devastating news reached the city, people were in disbelief. Friends and family collectively asserted that Lauren had no enemies or anyone who wished her harm. The only person that some began to suspect was her ex-boyfriend, Nathaniel Fujita. His name was mentioned cautiously, as everyone recognized his deep love for Lauren and believed he could never harm her. Nevertheless, the investigations proceeded. Lauren and Nathaniel were the envy of their entire high school. She was a petite, pretty brown girl who stood out for her energy and uniqueness, and he was a tall, ambitious soccer player adored by many girls. Although the two had known each other since childhood, they revealed their feelings later on. Their relationship began in high school and lasted 3 years. It was a colorful romance with all the typical ups and downs. They fought and made up, broke up and got back together. Both had strong personalities, but they tried to cherish the bond that existed between them. At least, this was true for the first few years of their relationship. Lauren Astley was born in 1993 in Boston. She was the only child of Mary and Malcolm, which meant that both parents focused all their attention on her. Since they both worked as teachers, they instilled important values in her from an early age, the most significant being their desire for their daughter to grow up to be a good person. When Lauren was 6 years old, her parents divorced. However, this did not affect her upbringing. Both continued to care for her and support her in all their endeavors. Lauren was a remarkable young woman, constantly engaged in various activities that kept her busy. She was passionate about tennis and soccer, sang in a musical group, and was a member of the Youth Symphony Orchestra. Additionally, she took part in her church choir, worked as a counselor at a children's camp. No school or town concert was complete without her involvement, and many were amazed by her irrepressible energy. She was active, everywhere at once. Another aspect of Lauren's hobbies was her social activism. At the age of 12, she helped the victims of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, Louisiana, and returned to the area 2 more times for similar missions. With her big, kind heart, open to the world and people, she cared for others more than she cared for herself. Those around her knew they could rely on her anytime for help or advice. Nathaniel attended high school with Lauren. He was a standout player on the school soccer team and showed great potential, dreaming of a future in sports. He was known as a diligent student in the life of the party, the eldest son of Beth and Toma Fujita. His family enjoyed prosperity and some fame in certain circles. His father was a renowned guitarist and a professor at Berklee College of Music in Boston, and was known for his unconventional approach to life. Interestingly, Nathaniel and Lauren developed a romantic relationship after she interviewed Nathaniel's father for a school project. After that, she began visiting their home more often, and once they stopped hiding their feelings, their parents began to communicate, visit each other. In the beginning, the first 2 years of Nathaniel and Lauren's relationship were wonderful. They were both attractive and their bond attracted a lot of attention. They enjoyed many activities together, going out, playing sports, studying, and more. However, over time, their closeness started to become overwhelming. Nathaniel grew more controlling, refusing to let Lauren go out by herself and becoming jealous over small things. He often imagined threats that didn't exist and wanted all of her attention for himself, leading to frequent arguments. Despite these issues, Lauren never reported any physical abuse. Instead, their relationship turned into an emotional roller coaster. Losing its sense of peace, this instability was uncomfortable for them both. Yet they struggled to regain the happy feelings they once had. As Lauren neared the end of her schooling, she started to consider her future. She made a list of the strengths and weaknesses of her relationship with Nathaniel and realized it was time to part ways. His behavior around her had changed, and her mother had unintentionally influenced her perception of their relationship, projecting her own ideas about a future with Nathaniel onto Lauren. Additionally, the upcoming college enrollment weighed heavily on her decision. Their paths were already separating. Lauren was applying to Elon University in North Carolina, while Nathaniel had received an invitation to play soccer at Trinity College in Connecticut. On April 1st, 2011, which was also her birthday, Lauren made a significant decision. She believed it was the right time to embrace changes and begin anew, as everyone had new relationships and activities to occupy their minds and help alleviate sadness. However, Nathaniel did not feel the same way. He experienced profound feelings of loss and loneliness. His enthusiasm for college had faded. He no longer engaged in practicing or socializing. Instead, he spent his days lying on the couch watching TV. Nathaniel slipped into a deep depression that became overwhelming for him. Everyone noticed that the once active, energetic young man had become withdrawn and depressed. He turned to alcohol and marijuana to escape his reality. It was difficult for Lauren to witness this change and to feel responsible for it. She sought advice from her friends on how to help him, but they all suggested that she should not interfere and instead give him the space to heal alone. They warned that her involvement could be seen as an attempt to fix him, which might make things worse. After graduation, Ashley's kindness and eagerness to help led to unexpected trouble. She and her friends organized a large party for about 150 people, held under a vast dome where everyone danced and had a good time. Nathaniel was among the guests, but he arrived quite drunk. When he saw Lauren dancing in the center of the dance floor, he attempted to talk to her. She politely asked him to leave her alone so he wouldn't ruin the party, explaining that they had already discussed everything before and that she didn't want to engage with him in his current state. Despite her request, he insisted on starting over the conversation. As time went on, Nathaniel's mood worsened, and he grew increasingly aggressive. Eventually, in a fit of anger, he punched a pole supporting the structure, causing it to shake and collapse, which ruined the celebration. The crowd was upset, wanted Nathaniel to leave the party. Later, Lauren approached her mother, crying and revealing that her ex-boyfriend would not leave her alone and was following her everywhere. She explained that at the graduation event, he prevented anyone from dancing with her and acted very badly. He was upset that she was happy without him. When the police learned that Lauren was missing, they immediately began questioning everyone close to her. All evidence pointed to Nathaniel, as he seemed to be the only one with a motive to hurt her. However, his friends all insisted that he was innocent. The officers had encountered previous cases where crimes were committed by unexpected individuals. Nathaniel and his mother met the detectives at their front door. During the discussion, Nathaniel appeared confused and upset about the sudden disappearance of someone he cared about. He shared that he had seen her recently around 7 p.m. when she stopped to talk to him in her car. Their conversation was pleasant but short, lasting no more than 5 minutes. He claimed that he was at home when Lauren disappeared and did not leave, but his alibi was hard to confirm since he was alone. His mother supported his story, mentioning that she had also seen Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend that day when Lauren visited the mall where she worked part-time. The mother was concerned about Nathaniel's well-being, which is why she had asked Lauren to speak with him. Nathaniel's parents had already consulted a psychiatrist, but the therapy sessions were unhelpful. Their son had become completely apathetic, merely going through the motions of life. His mother hoped that Lauren's words would inspire him, or at least help him regain some pride so he could move forward. This request made things more complicated for Lauren, but the meeting was supposed to be brief, and so it remained under the radar. After her meeting with Nathaniel's mother, Lauren had a phone conversation with Nathaniel, which was captured by the mall's security cameras. Concerned about her ex-boyfriend, she reached out to him and made plans to meet at 7:05 p.m. Lauren arrived at Fujita House and texted, "Here." The information Nathaniel and Beth provided was indeed valuable to the police. However, it was unclear where Lauren had gone afterward and why her car was left unlocked at the beach. The case became clearer when Lauren Astley's body was found. The detectives decided to visit Nathaniel again. However, he was not home this time. They didn't need him there, as they had a search warrant to gather evidence to support their theory about his possible involvement in the murder. Their examination began in the garage, where the specialists quickly noticed signs of a violent incident. Bloodstains were found on the floor, and several elastic cords hanging prominently on the wall matched those tangled in the victim's hair. Additional traces of blood were found throughout the house, including faint splatters on the doorknob, kitchen floor, kitchen sink, and bathroom sink. It was clear someone had attempted to clean up the mess, but did so hastily and poorly. In the basement, detectives discovered a black gym bag containing wet and muddy tennis shoes. In Nathaniel's bedroom, they found a hidden stash with a pair of bloody shoes and wet, bloody clothes. The mud on the shoes appeared to match the mud from the swamp where Lauren's body was found, but samples would need to be sent to a lab for official analysis. Experts later confirmed the detectives' suspicions, revealing that the blood found in Fujita House belonged to Lauren Astley. They gathered compelling evidence linking Nathaniel to his ex-girlfriend's murder, but his location remained unknown, leading to him being declared a wanted person. The investigation advanced rapidly, and just a few hours later, the suspect was located. He had been staying with a cousin in a nearby town. On the morning of July 5, 2011, Nathaniel was arrested on suspicion of murder. He appeared detached and quiet during his arrest and did not resist. However, he also refused to cooperate with investigators. During questioning, he remained silent about the charges against him. The detectives speculated that either he couldn't justify his actions or he was afraid to reveal too much, which is why he chose not to speak. Investigators believe that Lauren visited her ex-boyfriend after meeting with his mother because she was worried about him and wanted to cheer him up. They later went to Fujita's garage, where a fight may have occurred. During this altercation, Nathaniel attacked Lauren and began to strangle her with a bungee cord. After killing her, he drove her car to the beach and disposed of the car keys in a storm drain, which were later recovered. Nathaniel then returned home, loaded Lauren's body into his car, and drove it to a swamp. He attempted to cover up the crime. Although Nathaniel had not been physically violent with Lauren before, he had shown moments of uncontrolled aggression. His actions seemed to be driven by an inability to accept the breakup and feelings of resentment, On August 23, 2011, Nathaniel faced a preliminary hearing where he was charged with first-degree felony assault and battery using a dangerous weapon. When asked if he would plead guilty, he quietly said no. It soon became evident that his lawyers had acted unethically and had established a questionable strategy for his defense. Consequently, the prosecutor requested that the court deny bail for the defendant, and the court approved this request. On February 13, 2013, during the trial, Nathaniel's lawyer, William Sullivan, argued that his client was not mentally competent to stand trial due to insanity. He acknowledged that a murder had occurred, but emphasized that on the evening of July 3, 2011, Nathaniel had a severe episode of clinical depression that led to a psychotic breakdown. This episode impaired his ability to understand his actions during the attack on Lauren. Nathaniel's friends supported the defense's case by describing noticeable changes in his behavior, indicating that he had stopped socializing and lost interest in activities he once loved, like soccer, which he had even practiced despite being sick. Following his breakup with Lauren, it appeared that he transformed dramatically overnight. The psychiatrist who treated Nathaniel also testified at the court hearing. He diagnosed Nathaniel and recommended medication and therapy, but Nathaniel refused both. During the trial, it was proposed that the defendant's mental health issues might have originated from his painful breakup, but were mainly caused by his multiple head injuries from sports. The breakup worsened his condition and led to a severe episode. However, the prosecution disagreed with the defense's claims. Prosecutor Lisa McGovern argued that the defendant was aware of his actions, acted deliberately, and committed the crime for selfish reasons. Nathaniel was found to have been continuously stalking Lauren, causing her distress. On that particular day, just a few hours before her work ended, he showed up at the shopping center and watched her, as confirmed by CCTV footage. Lauren's situation, which arose at his mother's request, gave Nathaniel the chance to act on his criminal intentions. Witness testimonies supported the prosecution's case, and Nathaniel showed no remorse for his actions. An eyewitness saw Nathaniel returning home on the night of the incident with music playing in his car. A cousin also provided damaging information about him. She recalled that on the evening of July 3rd, her brother had called her to hang out, but she was busy and declined. He became very upset, expressing a desire to distract himself, but it seemed that didn't help. The following day, after news of Lauren's death broke, she reached out to him to ask if he was aware of it. He responded that no one would ever find out the truth about her death or the location of the murder weapon. He also acknowledged that he had driven his ex-girlfriend's car to the town beach. Recognizing that Nathaniel was implicated in the situation, his sister urged him to confess. In 2009, after Nathaniel and Lauren break up, an interesting incident occurred. Lauren went to a disco with friends, where a guy showed interest in her. Following the breakup, she decided to give this new guy a chance. However, Nathaniel, her ex, witnessed this and violently confronted the new man, threatening to harm him if he got close to Lauren again. Nathan's jealousy was evident. When he drank alcohol, he became unpredictable and dangerous. This situation revealed Nathaniel's violent tendencies and suggested that he could be a suspect. Additionally, new disturbing details emerged. Lauren's body showed wounds that had been inflicted prior to her death, including evident defensive wounds, which suggested that she had attempted to fight back. A forensic psychiatrist brought in by the prosecution evaluated the defendant's mental state. Unlike the earlier assessment, he concluded that Nathaniel was of sound mind and capable of making rational decisions at the time of the crime. The intense conflict between the prosecution and the defense hinged on whether Nathaniel would be deemed insane. If found insane, his punishment would be significantly less severe. While this wouldn't eliminate the charges against him, it would greatly reduce his level of responsibility. The trial was emotionally charged, as family members from both sides attended. Previously friends, they were now each suffering in their own way. Nathaniel's parents were in tears throughout the trial, struggling to comprehend what had occurred and feeling overwhelming guilt for their son. The burden of his actions weighed heavily on his loved ones. Mary and Malcolm were devastated by the loss of their only daughter. Meanwhile, Lauren was enduring unimaginable pain caused by the man she loved, Experts determined that she lived for several minutes after the rope around her neck was tightened. Lauren's mother desperately sought to understand why this tragedy happened to her daughter and how long it had been in the making. On March 7, 2013, after a 3-week trial, Nathaniel Fujita was found guilty on all counts. The jury took just 1 day to reach their final decision. The 20-year-old received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. Following the verdict, Lauren's father approached Nathaniel's parents and embraced them, showcasing his strong character and compassion. Both families had experienced a profound loss. In response, Mary and Malcolm Astley founded the Lauren Dunn Astley Memorial Fund to educate teenagers about healthy relationships. They believe that Nathaniel's crime could have been avoided. Lauren's family is now committed to raising awareness about preventing relationship violence and coping with breakups. In 2024, the State Superior Court ended mandatory life sentences without parole for offenders under 20 at the time of their crime. As a result, Nathaniel now has a chance for freedom, although no hearing has been confirmed as of June 2025. In March 2025, Nathaniel Fujita requested a retrial in the Superior Court, with prosecutors responding, but the outcome has yet to be decided. Some believe that love can easily turn to hate. Obsessive love, mixed with jealousy and selfishness, can sometimes lead to irrational actions. The tragic experiences of the Fujita and Ashley families illustrate this point.